Bonjour, today let's conjugate the verb avoir to have in 5 different French tenses. So we are going to conjugate it in the present tense, in the passé composé, imperfect, conditional and future. Okay, so we are going to conjugate the verb avoir in 5 different tenses. I have chosen avoir because it's a highly irregular verb and most important verb as it is known as an auxiliary verb. So knowing how to conjugate avoir in those different tenses will mean that you will be able to conjugate other verbs in the pluperfect, in the past conditional, future perfect, you name it, if you know what I'm about to teach you. Okay, so let's have a look at avoir in the present tense. We are going to learn how to say I have, you have, she has. Okay, so it is j'ai, I have, tu as, you have, il a, he has, elle a, she has, on a, one has, nous avons, we have, vous avez, you have, ils ont, they have, elles ont, they have. Okay, elles ont, the last one being the plural feminine. Okay, if you're not familiar with the subject pronouns, please go back to my lessons on subject pronouns and you will learn everything about the different ways of saying you and they. Okay, so we've seen this verb in the present tense. Let's have a look at what it looks like in its passé composé form. Now, the passé composé is quite simple. It's a past tense that has happened in the past and is gone done over with. We want to say, I have had, okay, because we are conjugating the verb avoir. It is conjugated with the verb avoir as an auxiliary in a past tense. So we want to say, I have had. Here you're using have as the verb, but have as the auxiliary as well. So what does it look like in French? It looks like this. J'ai eu, I have had. Tu as eu, you have had. Il a eu, he has had. Elle a eu, she has had. On a eu, one has had. Nous avons eu, we have had. Vous avez eu, you have had. Ils ont eu, they have had. Elles ont eu, they have had. So basically, if you look carefully, we have used the present tense of avoir and we've used it for our auxiliary in order to conjugate it in the passé composé. Avoir in its past participle is eu. That is weird, but you need to learn that. Let's have a look at what it looks like in the imperfect tense. So, we want to say I had or I was having or I used to have, okay? So what does it look like in the imperfect tense? It looks like this. J'avais, I had or I used to have, I was having. Tu avais, you used to have. Il avait, he used to have. Elle avait, she used to have. On avait, one used to have. Nous avions, we used to have. Vous aviez, you used to have. Ils avaient, they used to have. Elles avaient, they used to have. So here we go, we have conjugated it in the imperfect tense. So you're going to tell me, but why do I need to know this tense? Well, first of all, to know how to say I used to have, and not only that, to be able to conjugate in past tenses such as pluperfect. So we want to say, for example, I had walked in the woods. You would say j'avais marché dans les bois. Okay, j'avais. And this is what we've just learned how to say. So very important that you know that. And what about the next tense? It's future tense. Okay, that will be very important if you want to conjugate a past future perfect tense. Sorry, so we want to know how to say I will have walked. Okay, how do you say I will have? J'aurai, I will have. Tu auras, you will have. Il aura, he will have. Elle aura, she will have. Nous aurons. We will have. Vous aurez. You will have. Ils auront. They will have. There you go. Elles auront. Sorry about that. They will have. So it's ils auront, elles auront. Okay. Now sometimes I do that so mechanically that I can't remember which tense I'm conjugating, but it is definitely the future endings. Now, in order to conjugate an auxiliary verb, you've got to learn them by heart. There is no such pattern. When it comes to ER verb, there is more of a pattern. IR verb, there is patterns as well. And sometimes in third group verb, you have some kind of patterns. But to be and to have, please learn this by heart. Let's have a look at what avoir looks like in the conditional tense. We are going to learn how to say, I would have, okay? Remember, we don't have will, we don't have would, we have special endings. The stem for conditional in French is the same as the future. So you have or, A-U-R, you use that. And what you're going to do now is put the endings of the imperfect into the conditional. Okay, so we've got the stem of the future, or, and add the imperfect endings. Ion, ié, est. So here we go. J'aurais, I would have. Tu aurais, you would have. Il aurait, he would have. Elle aurait, she would have. On aurait, we would have. Nous aurions, we would have. Vous auriez, you would have. Ils auraient, they would have. Elles auraient, they would have. So now let's have a look at the chart completely. And so we've got the verb to have in the present tense, in the passé composé, in the imperfect, future, and conditional. And please have a look at it really carefully. Why don't you learn it if you are that, into it? Learn it. Why not? Okay? Okay, that's it for me. Remember, there is a support guide available to this lesson at learnfrenchwithalexa.com. And why don't you leave a comment? I will endeavor to answer. That's it. Au revoir, à bientôt. Bisous, bisous. Salut! Bonjour! Today let's conjugate the verb être, which means to be, in 5 French different tenses. The présent, the passé composé, we are going to do it in the imperfect, future, and conditional tense. Okay, so let's have a look at the verb être, to be. I have chosen this verb because it's really, really important that you know how to conjugate these verbs in a few different tenses. The reason being is that être is known as an auxiliary verb, and it will help you conjugate into some past tenses as well. So let's have a look at what être looks like in the present tense. So, être, highly irregular. So don't expect any patterns. Être in the present tense looks like that. Je suis, I am. Tu es. You are. Il est, he is. Elle est, she is. On est, one is, or we are. Nous sommes, we are. Vous êtes, you are. Ils sont, they are. Elles sont, they are. Okay, now if you're not familiar with the pronouns il and why, we've got 2 ways of saying you and they. Please refer back to my lesson on subject pronouns. Okay, now let's have a look at what être looks like in the passé composé. So basically, we are going to learn how to say I have been. It's a past tense that is gone, done, over with, and is finished. Okay, so how do we say I have been? It is j'ai été. So we're using to have as the auxiliary for être. I have been. J'ai été. Tu as été. You have been. Il a été. He has been. Elle a été. She has been. On a été. One has been. Nous avons été. We have been. Vous avez été, you have been. Ils ont été, they have been. Elles ont été, they have been, which is the plural feminine. Okay, so we had a look at the présent, at the passé composé. Please have a look at the chart here. It's really important for you to have a look at what this verb looks like in different tenses. And you will notice that because it's a really irregular verb, it looks really different. But I would like you to learn it by heart, especially the next tense coming, which is the imperfect or imperfect tense. So we are going to learn how to say I was, you were, and so on. Here we go. J'étais, I was. Tu étais, you were. Il était, he was. Elle était, she was. On était, one was. Nous étions, we were. Vous étiez, you were. Ils étaient, they were. Elles étaient, they were. Okay, so please learn it by heart. We use it absolutely all the time. Very important for you to know it. So let's have a look at another tense. Let's have a look at the future tense. Now, again, the future tense does not follow any patterns, especially when conjugating the verb to be or to have for that matter. The stem for to be in the future tense is ser, S-E-R. And then you add the special normal future tenses, which are as follow. Je serai, I will be. Tu seras, you will be. Il sera, he will be. Elle sera, she will be. On sera, one will be. Nous serons, we will be. Vous serez, you will be. Ils seront, they will be. Elles seront, they will be. Okay, so here we've got and we have conjugated the verb to be in the future tense. So without using will, because it does not exist in French, we have used the special stem and the special future endings for that. Let's have a look at what the conditional looks like. Now, the conditional, in order to form the conditional in any verbs, you need to have the stem of the future tense. Now, the stem is the same, so ser, S-E-R, okay, and you add the special imperfect endings. So I know we are talking conditional, but the conditional tense are the same as the imperfect endings. So here we go. Je serai, I would be. This is what we are trying to say. Tu serais. Have a look at the imperfect ending as well and transport them into the conditional one. Il serait, he will be, he would be. Elle serait, she would be. On serait, one would be. Nous serions, we would be. Vous seriez, you would be. Ils seraient, they would be. Elles seraient, they would be. Okay, now the reason why I would like you to learn this and watch this video again is for you to be able to learn to be in these 5 tenses by heart. This should help you then how to conjugate verbs such as the pluperfect, okay, or verbs such as the past conditional, okay, or future perfect as well. By knowing this, you will be able to know how to conjugate those tenses I've just said. I've just quoted, I've just told you about. Okay, that's it. Remember, there is a support guide available for this lesson at learnfrenchwithalexa.com, my website, and please leave a comment. I will endeavor to answer them. Au revoir, à bientôt. Bisous, bisous. Bonjour, today let's have a look at a French verb, which is the verb dire, which means to say in 5 different tenses. Okay, so I would like to conjugate the verb dire, which means to say, in 5 different tenses. We are going to conjugate it in the present tense, in the passé composé, in the imperfect tense, the conditional, and the future tense. So let's have a look at this verb. Dire, which means to say. Dire is an irregular verb. It is a verb which is known as the third group verb, so therefore it might be very different when conjugating it, okay? So let's have a look at what it looks like in the present tense. When I say present tense, we're going to learn how to say I say or I am saying. It means both. In French, we have only one way of saying these two things. It is je dis, I say, or I am saying. Tu dis. Have a look at the endings. Really important for third group verbs. Il dit. Elle dit. On dit. Nous disons. Vous dites. Ils disent. Elles disent. Now, dire, just like faire, is one of those very rare verbs where the vous form does not end with ez. Here it ends with tes. So be very careful with the verb dire and the verb faire. Now, let's have a look at the passé composé form of dire. Now, in order to conjugate a verb in the passé composé, you need to know how to conjugate the auxiliary verb to have or to be in the present tense. Now, the passé composé, it is as if I was saying I have said or I said. Now, we translate it directly in French as I have said, and we do not say I said, okay? So let's have a look at dire. Dire is conjugated with the verb to have in the passé composé, not to be, okay? And also, you need to know the past participle of that verb. When I mean past participle, I mean what the third bit can. I have said is the past participle, the same as to see, I have seen is the past participle. For dire, it is dit, D-I-T, okay? So, conjugate this verb, j'ai dit, I have said, means I said or I have said. Tu as dit, il a dit, elle a dit, on a dit, nous avons dit, vous avez dit, ils ont dit, elles ont dit. Now notice the z sound, ils ont, elles ont, okay, that's purely because il and elle have an S and on begins with a vowel. We call it a liaison. Now let's have a look at a third tense. I'm going to use the imperfect. Now the imperfect is a funny one. It's as if I'm saying I was saying or I used to say. Okay, but again, you have only one way of doing this in French, saying this in French. It is by adding special endings to the imperfect. And please refer back to my other lessons if you do not know how to use the imperfect endings properly. What you need to know, however, is that for using the imperfect, you need the nous form of the present tense of that verb. So, for dire, it is nous disons. So that stem, dis, is the stem we are going to use for the imperfect. So let's have a look what it looks like. Je disais, I used to say or I was saying. Tu disais, il disait, elle disait, on disait, nous disions, vous disiez, il disait, elle disait, okay? But you're going to say, but I don't know any of these endings. Well, yes, you do if you followed my lesson. So have a look at how to conjugate a verb in the imperfect tense, okay? That will help, I'm sure. Okay, let's have a look at another tense, which is the future tense. So we are going to learn how to say I will say. Now remember that in French, we don't have such a thing as will or would or could. No, doesn't exist. So how do we do it? Well, we use the future stem of that verb, okay, which I believe you need to learn by heart, by the way, and especially if it's a third group verb. And you use the endings of the future tense, okay? Now it goes like this. Je dirai, I will say. I will say, okay? Now you don't need to try to translate. Will does not exist. So use dire as the stem, D-I-R, and then add A-I to it, and then you have the future tense. I will say. Tu diras, you will say. Il dira, elle dira, on dira, nous dirons, vous direz, ils diront, elles diront. Let's have a look at the conditional now. Now we are going to learn how to say I would say. I would say. Now remember, we don't have will and would and could and should, okay? So you need to know the endings of that tense in order to be able to form a conditional. The endings are the same, exactly the same as the imperfect endings. So you're going to say, but hold on a minute. If it's the same as the imperfect, aren't we talking in a imperfect tense then? No, because you're using the stem of the future tense, not of the imperfect. So we are not using dis as the stem, we are using dire as the stem. So I would say is je dirais, which sounds the same as the future tense, by the way, except that it has an S. Tu dirais, sorry, my mistake, see, I make mistakes. Il dirait, okay, have a look. Elle dirait, on dirait, nous dirions, vous diriez, il dirait, elle dirait. Now you will notice that when you see the verb, okay, next to each other, that there is a pattern here. And all the patterns I've mentioned to you, try to pick on them, try to learn them and apply them to all the different verbs, okay? Okay, that's it for me. Remember to subscribe to Learn French with Alexa, the awesome YouTube channel. And there is a support guide available for this lesson at learnfrenchwithalexa.com with lots more examples. That's it. Au revoir. À bientôt. Bisous, bisous. Bonjour! Today let's conjugate the French verb faire, which means to do or to make, in 5 different tenses. Okay, let's have a look at the verb faire, which means to do or to make. Now, I have chosen faire because it's a highly irregular verb, but I wanted you to have a look at it in the chart, next to each other. The present tense, we are going to see the passé composé, then the imperfect, the futur, and the conditionnel. So have a look at the chart and let's see what it sounds like. Now, let's start with the present tense. Faire, to do or to make. So we are going to learn how to say I make or I am making, and this is the present tense. Now remember that we don't say I am making. In French we say I make. So I make is je fais. Je fais. Now remember that it means to do as well. So I do, I am doing. Tu fais. Il fait. Elle fait. On fait. Nous faisons, vous faites, ils font, elles font. Now, faire in the present tense, this is what we've just done, is really hard because for vous, it hasn't got EZ at the end, and it's the only verb where this happens, okay? So you've got to be, to be, actually, it happens in to be as well. So you've got to be really aware of that. Another thing I'd like you to be really aware of, it's what does the nous form look like? Nous faisons. The reason why I'm going to ask you to remember that, because it's going to be useful when we're going to conjugate in the imperfect tense. But let's do the passé composé now. The passé composé is formed of the auxiliary verb to have or to be. In that case, for faire, it is to have. So we need to know how to say I have, you have, he has, and so on, plus the past participle of faire, which is fait. Now, in order to say I have done or I did, because that's exactly what we are trying to translate with the passé composé, we do it this way. J'ai fait. I have done, okay? And that means equally, I did. So remember, in order to say I did, you must say I have done in French. There is no such a thing as I did, okay? So, I have done, j'ai fait. Tu as fait. Il a fait. Elle a fait. On a fait. Nous avons fait. Vous avez fait. Ils ont fait. Elles ont fait. Okay, that's fairly simple once you understand what the past participle of that verb is. In that case, it's faire or fait for the past participle, and whether it's conjugated with the verb to be and to have or to have. Okay, now let's have a look at the imperfect tense. Now, remember what I asked you to remember. Remember what I asked you to remember? Yes, the new form of faire is nous faisons. The reason why I asked you to do that is because you're going to use the stem of nous faisons and you're going to start this in the imperfect and add the imperfect endings. So let's have a look at the stem of nous faisons. It's F-A-I-S. So we use that for je. So we are going to learn now in the imperfect tense, learn how to say I was doing or I used to do. Remember, though in English you can say both, in French you do it only one way, and this is this way. Je faisais. See what we've done? We're using the stem of the new form of the present, and we're putting it into the imperfect. So, je faisais. What you need to know is what are the endings of the imperfect. For je, it's est. For tu, it's est, and so on. So, have a look. Je faisais, tu faisais, il faisait, elle faisait, on faisait, nous faisions, vous faisiez, well done, il faisait, elle faisait. Okay, so conjugating a verb in the imperfect tense is not as hard as you think as long as you know the stem, which comes from the new version of the present tense, and the endings of the imperfect. Let's have a look now at the future tense. Now, the future tense has a different stem completely, and you must, especially if it's a third group verb, you must know this by heart. For faire, it is faire, F-E-R, okay? So, how do you say I will do? Because, or I will make, because that's what we are trying to do. Je ferai, I will do. Tu feras. Il fera. Elle fera. On fera. Nous ferons. Vous ferez. Ils feront. Elles feront. Très bien. So we've conjugated the verb, the same verb, faire, and we in the future tense, I will do. Now remember, we don't have such a thing as will, okay? It's all about the stem and the endings, which is est, a, on, est, on, which by the way, if you look at the second column, passé composé, j'ai, tu as, il a, elle a, nous avons, ils ont, it's the same ending as the future tense. So you've got to be clever about that. There is a pattern. Now, let's have a look at the last tense, which is a conditional verb. Now, you're going to tell me, what is the conditional? Well, in English, it's when you say I would. So, I would do or I would make. Now, how do you do that? You take the stem of the future tense, which is faire, and you add the endings of the imperfect tense. Whoa! Now, have a look at the imperfect tense ending. A, ion, ie, est. Okay, so we've got that. Now, what you need to do now is you take the beginning of the future tense. There you go, faire, F-E-R, and add the endings of the imperfect. And then you have a would, conditional tense. So, je ferai, I would do. Tu ferais, you would do. Il ferait. Elle ferait. On ferait. Nous ferions. Vous feriez. Il ferait. Elle ferait. Right, okay, we've conjugated the verb in 5 different tenses. Now, I'd love to present the chart to you because it shows you patterns and it shows you that after all, it's not that hard to conjugate a verb in the third group, okay? Now, have a look at the lessons on the first group and the 5 comparative tenses, and they are really easy to conjugate, especially when you get the endings of the verb. Now, Remember, there is a support guide available to this lesson at learnfrenchwithalexa.com, my website. And also, why don't you subscribe to Learn French with Alexa and leave a comment? I would love to hear from you. Au revoir, à bientôt, bisous bisous. Salut! Bonjour! Today let's have a look at the verb aller, which means to go, in 5 different tenses. In French, obviously. Okay, let's have a look at aller. Now, I would like you to learn the 5 tenses of aller by heart, as it is extremely irregular. Though it has er at the end, it is not a regular verb, it is a highly irregular verb. So let's have a look at what aller looks like in the present tense. Now, aller, if it was a regular er verb, would be j'aille, tu ailles, il aille. But it's not that at all. And because it is irregular, you've got to learn this by heart. So, how do we say I go or I am going? In French, we say je vais. Can you say that? Well done. Tu vas. You go or you're going. Il va. He goes. Elle va. She goes. On va. One goes. Nous allons, we go or we are going. Vous allez, you go. Ils vont, elles vont. And that means they go. Now have a look at the pattern of the present tense. There is not much pattern with aller, the verb, as its infinitive form, is there? Apart from nous, which sounds or look a little bit like aller, the rest doesn't. So you've got to learn this by heart. Let's have a look at the same verb in the passé composé. So, we're going to learn how to say I went. And in order to do that, we are going to compose it, because it's called the passé composé, with an auxiliary verb and its past participle. So, the auxiliary verb we need for aller is to be, not to have, to be, because aller is one of those verbs which is known as a movement verb. So, in the passé composé, it's going to be, plus the past participle of aller, which is aller, with an accent, e. Can you see that? So, it becomes je suis allé, I went. So, what you need to know in order to conjugate this verb is how to conjugate to be in the present tense. Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont, and all you need to do is add the past participle aller. Okay, in English it is I have been or I have gone. Gone is the past participle of to go. Okay, well in French, aller with an accent is the past participle of aller. So here we go. Je suis allé, I went. Tu es allé, you went. Il est allé, he went. Elle est allée, she went. On est allé, one went. Nous sommes allés, we went. Vous êtes allés, you went. Ils, elles sont allés, they went. Okay? And you see that by adding this auxiliary verb to be, we have made a passé composé of that same verb. Okay? Aller. Now, let's have a look at another tense. We've done the present tense, we've done the passé composé. Let's have a look at the imperfect tense, okay? So it is like saying I was going or I used to go. Now, the way you do that is have the new form of the present tense, nous allons, take that stem, al, and add the imperfect ending. So they are like that. J'allais, I used to go or I was going. Tu allais, you used to go, you were going. Il allait, he used to go, he was going. Elle allait, she used to go, she was going. On allait, one used to go, one was going. Nous allions, watch out for that, it's not nous allons, here it's an imperfect tense, so we add an I. Nous allions, we used to go and we were going. Vous alliez, you used to go, you were going. Ils allaient, elles allaient. So they used to go, they were going. Okay? So we've conjugated the verb aller, which does not actually change that much from its infinitive form aller, okay, in the imperfect tense. Let's have a look at what this verb looks like in a future tense. Now, this is where it becomes extremely hard because unless you know how to say the stem of the future tense, you will never know how to say I will go. And remember that in French, we don't have will, okay? So you've got a special ending, which is est, a, on, et, on, okay? So let's have a look at what they look like. Let's have a look at what they look like. Now, aller in the future tense, the stem is ir. I-R, ir. So, knowing that for je, it is est, in the future tense, you say j'irai. I will go. J'irai. Okay, tu iras. You will go. Il ira. He will go. Elle ira. She will go. On ira. One will go. Nous irons. We will go. Vous irez. You will go. Ils iront, they will go. Elles iront, they will go. Feminine plural form of they. Okay, so we've got that, and you're going to say, but how do you know it's ir? Okay, it doesn't sound anything like aller. How do you know that? Well, you've got to learn this stem by heart. I absolutely do advise you to learn the main third group verbs, okay, such as faire, to do or to make, avoir, to have, être, to be, aller, to go, pouvoir, to be able to, devoir, to have to. These verbs are really important, and I really truly think that you should learn the stem of these verbs in the future tense and, as we are about to see, in the conditional too. So let's have a look at aller in the conditional tense. Now, you take the future stem, okay, which is ir. We've just established that, and you put those special conditional endings. Okay, now what are the special conditional endings of the French tense? It's quite simple. They are the same as the imperfect endings. And this is why you've got them all spread out so you can see. So now your eyes are geared towards the imperfect endings. You add them to the future stem, ir. See that? You glue them together, and then you've got the conditional tense. And basically, we are trying to say, I would go, you would go, and so on. So, here we go. J'irai, I would go. Tu irais, you would go. Il irait, he would go. Elle irait, she would go. On irait, one would go. Nous irions, we would go. Vous iriez, you would go. Ils iraient, elles iraient, and that means they would go. Okay, so we've got 5 tenses conjugated here for the verb aller, and I would like you to try to have a look at these videos again. That's it for me. Remember that there is a super guide to this lesson where we provide you with more examples on that verb aller. And subscribe to Learn French with Alexa and leave a comment. Au revoir, à bientôt, bisous bisous.